I would be like, okay, let's read this. So I'm going to read and understand. So step one, gecko lizards are found in any environment where there is an abundant population of gnats. Okay, so if there are an abundant population of gnats, I know there's going to be gecko lizards, right? Gnats can survive only in wet climates. So I'm like, okay, so gnats can only be in wet climates. Okay,
Yeah.
so if it's not wet, there can't be gnats. Because there are no gecko lizards living here, there must not be an abundant populations of gnats here. Okay, consequently, the climate must not be wet. All right, so my first thing is to ask myself, is this an argument or a set of facts? It's an argument.
So that'll be like step 2 after reading.
Yep, argument or a set of facts, or argument or statement.
Okay.
90% are arguments, right? The only ones really that are statements are must be true or strongly supported questions.
Right.
So then next step is find my conclusion. The climate here must not be wet. And why are we saying, and then it's to understand the reasoning for that conclusion. So we're saying that it must not be wet because gecko lizards are found whenever there is gnats, and the gnats can only survive in wet climates. There are no gecko lizards here, so there can't be an abundance of gnats. And here for me to I agree with you here on understanding these premises. I would probably diagram it, because it's saying, and how I would diagram this is, if there are, if there is an abundant population of gnats, that means that there are gecko lizards, right? Gnats can only be found in wet climates. So if there's abundant population of gnats, that means it must be a wet climate. Because there are no gecko lizards living here, there must not be an abundant population of gnats here. So there's no lizards, no gecko lizards. There must not be which is, this part's good, right?
Right.
But then what our conclusion is, consequently, the climate here must not be wet. Is this so I guess I didn't skip a step, but I'm going to re-say it. So we understand our stimuluses. Now I see that this is a flaw question. Our goal of a flaw question is to understand why our support does not guarantee our conclusion.
Okay.
So what we're trying to say is the climate is not wet. Why does our support here not guarantee this conclusion?
So my baby is literally climbing behind my chair. Hold on.
Hi.
Emily, no baby. Come. No baby. Hold on. You gotta go Miss Brianna, okay? So we can't say it's a wet climate because
do we know that it must not be a wet climate?
No, all we know is there's no gecko lizards, so there must not be gnats. But if there's no wet climates, that doesn't tell us about the lizards. There's no relationship between the climate and the lizards, just between the climate and the gnats.
Excellent. So what's the flaw here?
They're assuming because there are no gecko lizards that the climate is not wet.
Do you have any idea what the climate is?
No.
So explain this to me, like, not that you have to have this memorized always on the test, but explain to me what they're assuming here. What kind of flaw is this?
So they are They're assuming that because there's no gecko lizards, it can't be a wet climate because there's no gnats. But that doesn't mean that gecko lizards can't live in a different environment. It doesn't really specify that. Maybe they can live in dry climates too and eat something else that's not gnats,
Okay,
or
but but it says gecko. Okay, yes, and just because there's not gnats here, all we know is that there's no gecko lizards.
yeah.
Sorry, there's no gnats, so there's no gecko lizards. But couldn't the climate be wet and not have either of these things? Okay, so what are saying, like what this conclusion is saying is essentially, hey, if there's no, let me write this at the bottom. Essentially what we're saying is, hey, if there's no gecko lizards, then there is no gnats. And if there's no gnats, the climate can't be wet.
Right.
Well, no. They're taking something that is necessary for the gnats to happen and acting as if we don't have this, it's sufficient to cause this, right? So I was trying to get us to like the extreme LSAT vocabulary, but you were picking up on the right thing. So let's go ahead and look at, okay, so go ahead and walk me through these answer choices.
A, presumes without providing justification that gecko lizards can survive only in environments with abundant gnat populations. I think that's what we said. Gecko lizards.
Is that the flaw though? Because what are the two questions we have to ask ourselves when it's a flaw question?
Did it happen and is it a problem?
Yeah, so does this happen? Do we assume, because this means assume, that gecko lizards can survive only in populations with abundant gnat populations?
No.
No.
Okay, B, presumes without providing justification that all wet environments contain abundant population of gnats.
Do we assume that all wet environments have an abundant population of gnats? Let's skip it for now. We don't know. Skip.
Okay. C, does not consider whether small populations of gnats can survive in climates that are not wet. I wouldn't choose that because it's just small populations and
we don't
care about that.
Excellent.
D, does not mention whether gecko lizards eat anything besides gnats. Maybe? I don't know.
Does that happen? Do we not mention whether gecko lizards can eat anything besides gnats? Do we mention that they does not?
I mean, it's not mentioned.
Right, so it does happen. So
yeah.
The answer to question 1 is yes. But is it a problem that we don't mention that gecko lizards don't eat anything besides gnats?
No.
No. Like that has nothing to do with the climate must be very wet.
Yeah.
We don't care what they eat.
Okay, E, fails to establish that some gecko lizards could not survive in a dry climate containing only a small, no, I wouldn't choose that.
Why?
Because it's asking about geckos surviving in dry climates, and that's not what we're trying to go after.
Yeah, excellent. We don't care that we don't fail to establish that they can't. Like, who cares? We're trying to prove that this is excellent. So let's go back to B. And what is translate what B is saying to us?
B is saying that we're assuming if it's wet, then we must have a lot of gnats.
Yeah, okay, so it's assuming that all wet environments contain abundant populations of gnats. Because what is, okay, so how would you diagram this statement?
So starting at 11, everything is good.
If wet environment, then you have gnats?
Yes, if it's wet, then you have gnats. And what's the contrapositive of that?
If you don't have gnats, it's not a wet environment. Okay, so yeah,
And
that's what it's doing.
that's exactly what it's doing, right?
Yeah.
It's not worded how I would have expected, but can we see how that would fit in?
Yeah.
And so how I would approach this question is, if I can't cross it off, this one I cannot, like, assuming, I would have been like, assumes that all wet environments, because it's bringing in this all wet environments, I wouldn't have crossed it off. So this is not like the logical, I'm talking just like tests for us average people of how I approach the tests. Some people will be like, no, you have to think it all the way through and make sure it makes sense logically. I would have liked B because it brings in all environments. I'm not going to waste a lot of time trying to understand what it means. I'm just going to skip it. Be like, you know what? I don't like, I'm not going to cross it off because it does bring in this all wet environments. And that's what's in my conclusion.
Yeah.
But these other ones, once I cross them off and I can easily see like, hey, this does not happen and this is not a problem, then I'm going to go back to B and I'm going to diagram it out and see how it works. And it's exactly what we need.
Yeah. I wonder what I put for that one.